Hi, my name is Wes Lawton, and I'm a Grief Support Services Manager for Hospice of Michigan, based out of Macomb County. I'm the co-facilitator of Men Overcoming Loss, along with Will Gasper up in Cadillac. And I'm recording this video to give you a summary of our most recent Men Overcoming Loss group, which took place about a week ago at the time of this recording. It's the third Tuesday of every month from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. So I hope that you'll be able to join us in the future if you haven't already, or if you have to return to the group. It's always good to be able to connect with people over a period of time and get to know one another, continue to support one another along the journey. I apologize for the sort of unnatural look that I've got going on today with the fake grass in the background and the headphones. I'm working from home, as many people are. I feel privileged to be able to do that. I'm in the office, 1-2 days a week, and at home the rest of the time. And the only spot I'm able to record this is my bedroom, hence the grass in the background, instead of getting a nice shot of what Wes Lawton's bedroom looks like. And then the headphones, of course, I'm here with family, and so this allows me to record a little bit better in terms of the audio. At the most recent group, one of the guys commented that looks like I have Princess Leia hair going on, and I have to say that I agree, especially with the virtual background. But nevertheless, hopefully you can look past that and gain something from the content that I'm about to present to you. So our topic this time was a little bit less structured than usual. We didn't have like a slideshow or anything, but we did present an anger iceberg. So I'm going to pull that up right now and show you. You should be able to see that. This is just sort of an illustration that we used. And so we talked about anger and how for many men, and as always, not all of this is going to apply to all guys all the time. This is just sort of something that most men tend to deal with on some level. And so men, more than women, we have seen and learned from research that we're more comfortable sometimes expressing anger than other feelings. And the thought on that is that many of us are taught at a young age that it's not appropriate for boys to feel sad or scared or in pain, or some of these other examples that you see below the word angry. And so sometimes you might be feeling those things as a human being, and it can come out as anger. And so it's important, whether you're a man or a woman, certainly for a man, to pay attention to your anger and ask yourself, is there something behind this? Sometimes anger is just anger. And I believe, anyway, that anger can be justified. Anger can tell us that there's something wrong and something that needs to be fixed, mended. And so, I don't think that anger is always bad, but oftentimes, again, there's something underneath that we can learn a lot from if we pay attention to it and ask about it, and sort of listen to the voice within ourselves, listen to our own feelings. That can help us learn a lot about ourselves and figure out what's really going on, and hopefully get to a place of peace and healing. That's what this is about. So we use an iceberg to demonstrate anger, because an iceberg is usually about 10% above the surface of the water. And so you can see that's what the boat there can see. Anger straight ahead, watch out. And so from a surface level, it looks just like anger, and that's all there is to it. But the whale underneath there says, let's go deeper. And so that's what I'm talking about with asking what is underneath that. And then, of course, with an iceberg, 90% is below the water. And this isn't a comprehensive list. As you see in the very bottom right there, it says name another feeling. So you can add to that. I know a guy said in our group last week that he would add, I think it was powerlessness. And so he would put that on there for himself. Another big one that I would put probably is pain. And I know the word hurt is there. To me, hurt implies somebody hurt me. There's sort of an object there. it came from somewhere. And that's often true. That can be part of the pain, but oftentimes we just feel pain in general. It's coming from a number of places, and many of them are out of our control, but it hurts. And sometimes that can come out as anger. That's sort of a usual suspect for me, along with some of these other ones. Guilty is another big one. And so again, you can maybe identify with something on this list, on this graphic, or you can fill in the blank for yourself. So that's sort of the main lesson, the main topic that we wanted to discuss and figure out how it applies to us. And I'll leave this up just for another moment here as I let you know, one of the guys gave an example of his anger toward the doctors, that they didn't do more. And he was sharing his story, which I'm sure that some guys out there can definitely identify with. It's the loss of his spouse. And uh, you know, just was talking about how the mistakes that he saw the doctors make. And somebody else chimed in and talked about how the doctors, you know, they frequently do the best that they can do, and sometimes it's not enough. And so, you know, I don't know this guy's situation other than his own perspective in the middle of his grief. That may or may not be the case for him, may or may not be the case for your story. But it's understandable to feel, you know, these are the people who are supposed to save the day. They're supposed to have the power um, and the knowledge and the resources to be able to heal somebody. And now this person who I love is gone. And if it's anybody's fault, it's theirs. That's an understandable thing to feel. And certainly doctors aren't perfect, and they do make mistakes. Oftentimes they do their best and they still fall short. That's just one example. Many people can feel angry at God. They can feel, you know, because if they believe in a God who is in control and who's supposed to be loving, how could you take my loved one from me? That's not a very loving thing to do. And you're supposed to be in control here. Or another one can be angry at yourself. How did I let this happen? And I think that that's really describing guilt. Guilt is anger toward yourself. It's turned inward. It's another way of looking at it. You know, anger toward other family members, or angry at your loved one for leaving you. That's one that is very common that a lot of times we don't feel comfortable talking about. So that anger can be there, but again, underneath that may be something else. I'll give the example again of pain. You know, you may be angry that the person left you, but underneath that can be, how could you do this to me? It hurts so much. You know, I miss you, and you're supposed to be there for me. I feel abandoned. You know, there may be some other things under there that, as you can tell, are even more meaningful. They get right to the heart of the issue. And so that's what we need to address in addition to the anger. And often that anger needs to be expressed. Um, Again, you know, some of us, might have been told that it's okay for a boy or a man to be angry, to express that anger. And a lot of angry guys out there in our society as a result of that. Um, you know, they might be more angry because they're feeling all these other things, and that's all they know how to show. And then another problem is that we often don't know how to express anger in a healthy way, in a constructive way, or at least in a way that is not destructive. And many of that, you know, a lot of that comes from the examples that many of us had from others in our lives, how they expressed anger. And so we feel like we need to hurt somebody or break something or whatever it might be. And there are ways of expressing your anger positively. You can turn anger, or really any of these feelings, but certainly anger as a driving emotion, you can turn it into action. You can turn it into creativity. Um, you know, you can talk about it or write about it. Those are some very helpful ways to express anger. And sometimes you have to do those kinds of things. You have to express your anger. You have to get it out to figure out, you know, what's going on underneath that hurricane. Um, Sometimes when you're just so worked up and you're filled with what feels like anger, and it is anger in that moment, you can't really begin to look underneath the surface again, as this illustration shows. So it's important to be able to express your anger. And because I was going to say, on the other hand, some of us were taught that you should not express anger, that anger is a wrong thing to feel. Um, and you need to keep it inside, or else you're going to hurt somebody. And as I just explained, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And anger is a valid emotion, and it needs to be expressed, again, in a way that uh, hopefully minimizes the damage. And That can be easier said than done. It takes practice. We use the term anger management for a reason, because it takes active management sometimes. It can be out of control for many of us at times. So I'm going to stop sharing this here and just want to talk a little bit about some other things that came up in the group, just very briefly. And as always, I don't reveal any identifying information about the people in the group. And so if you join in with the group, you don't have to feel like, oh, people are going to know what I talked about necessarily, unless you were there and then you already know the person. But a lot of the guys were really connecting and feeling supported, feeling solidarity over. We talked a little bit about regret and about disappointment and about how, again, we had the example of the guy who felt that the doctors could have and should have done more. And on the other hand, there were guys who felt like I could have and should have done more, not me, but themselves. They were quick to blame themselves, which again is a really common thing. I, maybe perhaps especially as the man, should have been in control. That's one of the roles that we talked about that are commonly ascribed to men and that we ascribe to ourselves, especially even more than women at times. And there just should have been something. And I remember talking about how whether it's anger or guilt, anything on that spectrum, oftentimes that can come from, I just can't believe, I just can't accept or acknowledge that this loved one of mine died. That's just such a huge loss that it can't be okay. It can't have just happened. It can't happen on its own. A disease that is completely out of my control and to a large extent out of anybody else's control can't have taken my loved one. There must have been something that somebody could have done about it. And you can see how that can easily come out as blaming somebody else, blaming yourself. We're really good at looking in the past and figuring out what could have been done better, and especially what could I have done better. And I always encourage people to be fair to yourself in that, if you're going to look at the areas where maybe you did fall short, you also have to remember maybe how tired you were, how you didn't know things at the time, how you have to look at all the things that you did right as well, if you're going to be fair to yourself. And oftentimes for every mistake that we make, which is almost always unintentional, if it's somebody that we love as much as you likely loved your loved one, then for every one of those mistakes that we make, there are 1,000 things that we did that were loving, compassionate, sacrificial, ways that we were there for them. And so you've got to acknowledge that and, maybe feel, whether it's pride or celebration or whatever, or just accepting. You got to acknowledge those things too, to be fair to yourself throughout that whole process if you're going to look into the past and figure out what could have been done better, which is a normal and natural thing to do. And it can be helpful if it's done in that way, where you're fair to yourself, you're fair to other people. And you often find that there was so much that it was out of anyone's control. It doesn't make it any easier, but it can give you a little bit more helpful and effective perspective looking back and applying it to how do I feel about it now and what do I do about it now. So the guys were talking about the regret that they should have been able to do more. And there's nothing that I can say or anybody else can say to make you not feel that way. Something that you have to work through oftentimes. It's something that you feel, that you experience, that you go through. That's the way the grief is in general, which is why we so value this group, not only the information that Will and I give out, the sort of educational aspect of it that gives you tools, but you still have to get through it. You have to apply the tools. You have to go through that process. And it often doesn't make sense, but it's still there. It's still real and true for you. And another side of that, feeling like I should have done more, is maybe I disappointed my spouse, and they maybe were angry at me at death, they're disappointed in me, or perhaps wherever they are now, if they're in heaven or whatever, they feel a little bit disappointed in me or something like that. And so that's something to work through as well. And it's good to acknowledge that, to talk about it, and especially helpful to find other people, and in this case, other men who they feel that too. There's real power in the words "me too." And I know that that's a whole, separate movement that started on a different topic a few years ago now. But those words, me too, they have a meaning of you're not the only one, you're not alone. You're normal. There's nothing wrong with you to feel this. And then one other issue that I think the guys were talking about quite a bit is oftentimes feeling alone in their lives. Not like they don't have any support oftentimes, but that the support of people around them who are trying to help and have good intentions, they don't know how these guys feel. They don't know, and maybe in your case, how you feel. And they make assumptions and they do things that they try to help, but they can sometimes be hurtful unintentionally. Or again, just show an ignorance or a naivety if they haven't been there themselves. Maybe they had a different type of loss. Maybe they lost the same kind of person. Maybe it was a spouse for you, a spouse for them, or a parent for both of you, but they had a very different relationship, and so they couldn't quite understand. And so the positive side of that is, again, these guys are connecting in this group. They're finding one another, and they don't 100% understand one another. I certainly don't 100% understand them, neither does Will, but we're there together. And we do understand a lot of the same feelings and experiences as one another. And so that helps to say, you may not know exactly how I feel, but you do more than the average person, and maybe more than anybody else in my life. So really thankful and proud to be part of this group in that way and to help facilitate that. And that's something that the guys bring to one another much more than Will or I do. Will and I were talking about that a little bit afterwards, and how, or maybe it was at the end of the group, I don't remember which, but how really the guys really benefit from one another, usually more than from us. And so it's really an honor for us to be a part of this group and to watch that happen and try to help facilitate that. So those are really the main topics from this last group. And I want to just once again invite you to join us in real time. And we're still all virtual at this point. We're talking about ways to get together in person in the future, but still a little ways away. We don't have a date for you. But the guys here are finding that this is a whole lot better than nothing. And they're still really benefiting big time from it. And you can still feel that solidarity, that support. You can still learn the things that we're teaching one another over video. And it's usually easier to join than you may expect. I know not all of us are tech savvy, and if you really feel more comfortable with it, you can dial in over the phone, and you don't have the video aspect. People can't see you, you can't see them, but it's still very beneficial, and we've got studies that show that as well. And so I encourage you to consider joining if you haven't done it before. Again, third Tuesday of the month. So let me look at my calendar here to make sure I give you the right date for the next one. It's going to be November 17th, and that's from 6 to 7 p.m. Go ahead and contact me at 586-263-8514 or by email at wlawton@hom.org. HOM is for Hospice of Michigan. And Lawton is spelled Lawton, so WLAWTON@HOM.org. Or you can contact Will Gasper, and I don't have his phone number pulled up here, but his email is WGasper, so WGASPER @HOM.org. Reach out to us. We'll get you on our email list. We only send a small handful of emails every month, and some of the most important ones I feel are the reminders and the links to join us over Zoom. So hopefully you can do that and share your presence, your experience, your insights, and certainly gain from those of others as well. I hope that your month goes well, and look forward to seeing many of you in next group, November 17th, I think it is. Again, I just want to make sure I don't give you the wrong date. That's it, from 6 to 7 p.m. Look forward to seeing you there. Thanks. Take care.